Good morning and welcome to C.A.B.B Notes for September 2016. I'm very happy that Alan Baker and Ryan Scott could be with us this morning, and we have some very varied experiences on gardening to talk about. Let me first show you my demonstration here. You see, we have a red beet there that's been sort of gnawed away. Here's another red beet that even is hollower, and it was my conclusion that since it was such a dry summer, these rodents or whoever ate these were a little drier than usual, so they went hunting around to find something that had moisture in it, so they ended up with this.
They're voles that cause that, VOLES.
Oh yeah?
And they love these. They're in my garden every year no matter what the weather.
Oh, really?
Do they burrow as well?
What's that?
Do they burrow as well?
Just in the top couple inches. They don't go deep. So they make these little tunnels through the top of the soil.
Does that destroy roots?
They like to eat roots. My beets last year, 50% of them were gone. And the carrots they're just holes in the ground where the...
That reminds me of Winnie the Pooh with the gopher or whatever pulling carrots from underneath.
They also eat potatoes, sweet potatoes. They don't really touch any of the rutabagas, turnips, or parsnips.
They don't touch those?
Wow.
But the sweeter stuff, what I've done this year, because I started doing my melons.
Mm-hmm. Oh, above ground.
Oh yeah.
Huh.
Because they have the leaf cover so predators can't find them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Put gum around.
Oh, in the paper wrapper?
No, just plain gum, and they eat that, and it doesn't bode well in their digestive systems.
Oh,
I've tried that for woodchucks.
Another trick someone told me that works is, the little windmills people put in their lawns.
Oh yeah.
You put them in there, and they don't like that vibration.
Huh.
Because I did that the year I did not do that with my sweet potatoes. They all look like that. The year I did put gum in around each one and put the little windmills in.
And it looks cool, right?
And it looks cool. And it almost had like less than 5% damage as opposed to over 30%.
Wow.
Huh.
So it's non-toxic to us, but I guess they don't like gum.
So an essential gardening ornament is the windmill.
The windmill,
Cool.
I got that from someone else. These aren't my ideas. These are all other people's ideas, and I steal them.
Oh,
I don't have very many original ones.
That's a good idea, though.
You gotta collect them. There's a lot of ideas you gotta have to keep a garden going, right?
But according to our agency of pesticides in Montpelier, I believe putting gum in is illegal because it's not have an EPA pesticide label on it.
Oh, I didn't try that with woodchucks.
Oh no.
There's all good. I won't even go into all their
It
idiocracy.
fell out of my pocket when I was in the garden.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Ryan was telling me before we started here that the reason he has so many beautiful looking vegetables here is because he watered so often.
Yeah. I definitely think this year was much drier than last, even though everyone was complaining last year how dry it was.
Yeah.
And that continued through the winter. But I have a well and I live by myself, so I didn't see it too harmful to water quickly every day, or I'd say 4 to 6 days a week I watered. When we'd get rain, I would wait probably up to a week each time before watering again. But I was pretty happy this year. I also was more organized with the garden, staking tomatoes instead of forgetting to last year until it was too late. I planted things properly and fortunately trapped and released woodchucks elsewhere so they wouldn't destroy half my garden like last year.
Sharing the pain? Is that what it's called?
I tried to find a place that wasn't residential for a good mile or so since I live out in the woods. So I thought about that too. I was like, do I want to release them near someone else's garden? Not really. I wouldn't wish that on them, Mm-hmm. I guess the woodchucks in my yard really took a liking to sunflower leaves, the entire pea plant, I would say, even the cucumbers. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, all of my dill last year. All of it, right down to the ground when it was 2 or 3 feet high.
Wow.
They ate a lot last year. This year I didn't have many problems because I took care of it early. They did eat all of my lettuce early this year. but I was able to get rid of them, or I've still seen a couple around, but they haven't touched the garden.
What about high velocity lead poisoning?
My neighbor suggested that.
And they are edible. I've had woodchuck.
Oh, nice.
So they are something you can shoot, not just throw away, but you actually eat them.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, if you're into
Maybe for
butchery.
next year.
They're just an herbivore. All they eat is like cows.
Yeah.
Just eat grass and green stuff.
Uh-huh. So you have a fairly extensive garden now. You said you had a whole bunch of pepper plants?
So I have, last year the peppers didn't do much until this time. They just finally, a lot of them just started flowering. I got a lot of bell peppers last year, but a lot of my hots weren't very productive until late in the season.
Huh.
Even though I started them earlier inside than I did this year. But this year I have, I don't know how many varieties, maybe, I have probably like 12 sweet peppers and maybe 15 or 20 hot peppers.
Wow.
And I have like 60 total pepper plants.
Amazing.
They're much more productive than last year. Some are still a little late, I think. Some of the bell peppers aren't doing as much this year, even though I rotated the garden. But as you can see, some of them are pretty productive.
Very
I was
nice.
really happy with this. I think this needs to be stuffed.
Yeah.
Definitely stuffed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got ghost peppers, habaneros, these Hungarian wax. Last year, my red bells were labeled red bell, but they came out as something similar to this.
You labeled them or someone else labeled them?
From the store. Yeah.
Wow. So these are pickles you put up from last year or this year?
These ones I made this year, yep. So I had 3 mounds of various pickling cucumbers, and of course this year my dill was successful, as you can see.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been making dill pickles mostly, but I've tried some other kinds as well. So I've made probably, I'm guessing 30 pounds total of pickles. Just that would be the cucumber weight.
Amazing.
I probably ate half of that.
Yeah, they're good.
How many hot peppers does one need?
I will definitely be sharing, but I do a lot of stuffed jalapenos, and I'll be drying and grinding a lot of the peppers too to use all year. So I make big batches of chili regularly, and most foods I make spicy as an option, I guess. So I imagine I'll use at least half of them over the winter, and I'll be sharing a lot.
Very nice.
I don't know what to do with a lot of the ghost peppers. I don't want to dry those in my oven. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near the oven.
Oh.
It'd be like being pepper sprayed.
Wow. Huh.
So if you want some hot peppers.
I did not grow any this year. I have so many bags of them from previous years that
Oh, nice.
it's like, what am I going to do with more hot peppers? So I didn't grow any.
Are they dried or?
Oh, they're all dried.
Oh, cool. What kinds?
Some paprika peppers.
Nice.
And what were they? They're about that long. I don't remember the name of them, but they're very prolific. And no matter what the weather is, they produce and they stand upright. The little.
Oh, are those like Tabascos or?
No, they weren't Tabasco. They're grown chilies.
They sound like maybe Thai peppers. The Thai peppers grow upright.
But not as hot. They're like slightly hotter than jalapenos.
Oh, nice.
But no matter what, and they dropped that variety. They always kept making new varieties. Like that was a good one. No matter how cold it was, that pepper always produced.
Wow.
What color does it turn?
They turn red, but
Yeah.
they start green, yellow to red.
Oh, nice. Sounds good.
But my favorite one is the Hungarian hat wax, which you can slice that and put on a sandwich. It's not too hot.
Yeah. I was surprised. These are almost as hot as a jalapeno this year, I'd say. But my jalapenos are, I mean, I can eat some hot food, but they're hotter than, or about, I swear they're almost as hot as habaneros. Like, they've got to be at the max of
Scoville units.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
Huh. So, what are some of the main crops you grow, Alan?
The only thing I didn't grow this year that I grew in the past was sweet potatoes. I just didn't get around to it.
Yeah.
That was a lazy garden this year. A lot of empty beds and cover crops. You end up with too much stuff and it goes to waste. So
Yeah.
sort of scaled back a little bit.
Yeah.
And grew a lot of like cover crops. Some beds were still in cover crops all year, so they weren't even planted. And I had a lot of volunteers. I pick up the food waste at Hannaford's and I feed it to the chickens. And there's one place out in the chicken yard that was just bare soil. And it's like, that's where I just kept dumping it.
Nice.
And this year it was bare, nothing's growing, and suddenly it's covered in tomatoes and squash.
What kinds of various squash?
Mystery stuff, because the seeds are mostly hybrids.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
But there's some nice looking butternuts. There's some other more
Really?
like cheese squash, the flattened ones with the big
Yeah.
ribs on them. And there's a tomato. It's about this long and it's cylindrical, just like your finger. And it's really sweet.
Huh. That sounds good.
So I'm going to save those seeds and see if they come back true to that, because they're sweeter than cherries.
Nice.
Wow.
And it's from the compost and rest of the garden. I've got more tomatillas, places they've never been before.
Very cool.
They're a weed. I'm pulling them out just to get rid of them. There's so many of them.
Yeah.
But you almost have to destroy them. You pull them out, throw them in the ground, and they just root into the grass and keep growing.
Wow.
They don't die.
I'll have to keep that in mind.
Well, the place they were in last year, we made sure we picked up every one of them because they become
Yep.
a weed. So
Mhm.
there's none in that area, but all these other places where I spread the compost, I don't know where all the seed came from.
That's cool.
Wow, a lot of people who say they don't have a green thumb would be glad to hear that.
Well, the ground's very fertile.
Yeah.
I mean, in the chicken yard, it's very fertile.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a brown spot 3 times the size of this table and surrounded by grass, and it all came up into various squashes and tomatoes.
So you'd be picking squash until the frost, right?
And in the regular garden, the same thing. There's areas I got pumpkins like this that I never planted.
You're lucky. I have one
Wow.
pumpkin and I planted several.
And in the ones you got the plants, you planted the plants. I covered them remake. They are no bigger or better than the stuff that came up on its own.
Yeah.
So it's like, why do I put all this work?
Yeah.
Or are those seeds that come up are just the strongest of the ones that come out of the compost and do as well as the ones you pampered? I don't understand that.
Oh, interesting.
I had that with tomatoes on the side where I have my squash now. I had tomatoes. I left so many tomatoes because I still had so many green ones last year when we had several nights of frost, so I just left them. And I've been told, they're store-bought seeds. They shouldn't grow. Well, I had hundreds of tomato plants on that side. I pulled out most, but I left a few, and those grew up. I didn't stake them or anything. Well, I sort of staked them eventually, but they grew up to become just as large as the ones that I had started in the wintertime inside.
It's sort of interesting how
Yeah.
that happens.
They're not nearly as productive, and they haven't really ripened much, but I've got this from one that I started, and the other ones aren't as good, which I'm relieved about. Otherwise I'd say maybe I'll just do that every year.
Yeah.
Well, there is a lazy way of gardening, particularly for lettuce and spinach. Coriander is another one. Let them go to seed. Kale, collect the seeds, and then later this month, till an area, put them in, till it again, and they'll come up next year. I got a lot of little areas in the garden that come up
Nice.
total coriander every year,
Oh,
or
that's great.
spinach, or lettuce. Where so it's you're using a ton of seeds. They're probably all cross pollinated, so it's not going to come up as a variety that was planted.
Yeah.
But
Which is cool.
but it's out. Another one that came up. We had a giant burn pile. Burned it back in August. There's an enormous squash plant there with crooknecks that are interesting because they're crooknecks, but they're almost ribbed with a light greenish shade to them.
Oh, I think I've seen something like that.
But
Yeah.
I don't. Where did it come from? There's a giant burn pile. They came out. The seeds had to be in the. I don't know where they came from.
That happened at the middle school by their greenhouse. They had more or less like a brush pile. It was just logs and things, and through the brush and the branches are sunflowers that are in July. They were 10 or 12 feet high and fully
there's a
bloomed.
compost pile. It was a
Ooh.
compost they bought or topsoil they bought.
Yeah. Oh, have you seen this pile then?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he threw some seeds into it as well, but it was cool in July when my sunflowers were 3 feet, at the most 3 feet, probably 2 feet. Theirs were 12 and fully bloomed like this.
Wow.
That was really cool. I mean, they get sun there all day though, I think, whereas I get on a good day 6 hours, I think.
In lower elevation.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So we were gonna have some kind of a discussion about the kind of soil you need to combat the dry weather?
Well, like I said, my garden, I work with the middle school gardens. I work with the North
Very
Bennington
cool.
Yap gardens, and they have a sandier soil. So their soil doesn't hold water as much.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been in production as long either, where they haven't had a chance to build it up through a lot of cover cropping and adding compost because they don't have compost to add.
Right.
So my soil is a Georgia silt loam, holds water really well, almost too well, because in the spring I almost have to till it when it's too wet to get it to start to dry out.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I till it, it dries, but before that it stays pretty wet.
Is it too wet for roots or not?
No, once you get it tilled, and like I say, there's lots of compost and lots of cover cropping, so the organic matter is probably pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
For every percent you have an organic matter, the soil can hold, depending on which data you believe, between 16 and 25,000 gallons of water per acre. So if you just increase the organic matter by 1%, you can increase the water holding capacity of that soil tremendously. So if you take a soil like, I think the middle school soil was 3.2% organic matter. If you raise that to 5.2 to make it easier figuring, you could have another 40,000 gallons of water holding capacity in an acre of ground.
Wow.
So that's like you were talking before the show started, what can you do to combat drought? You would think about it all the time. You're always doing things to build organic matter into your soil, either through adding compost or through adding cover crops and tilling them in and keeping the ground covered all the time. Because things that increase the water holding capacity of the soils increase organic matter, reduce your tillage. The more tillage you do, the more that adds oxygen to the soil, which helps the organic matter break down faster. So the less tillage you can do. Mulching, as everyone knows, you pick up, pull leaves up in the woods, it's always wet under them. So if you can mulch once your plants are up, you can mulch them, particularly right after a big rain. Mulch it, and they don't have that transpiration. The water's going, evaporation and transpiration going on as much.
Yeah.
And if you have a bigger farm, or if you're small like I am, and I have chickens, I have half the garden the chickens run on from November to May. So and I feed them on my beds. So any wasted feed is there for organic matter. All the manure is there. They're picking up all the other weeds, anything else that starts to grow, they're picking up clean. So in a big farm, a commercial farm, if you can put a livestock component into it, plus having cover crops and reducing your tillage, you can increase your organic matter and the water holding capacity of the soil. So in a dry year, and this has been documented time and again, organic farms weather droughts and floods much better than a conventional farm that's just doing corn, soybean, or corn, alfalfa. They have a bigger rotation with corn, soybeans, small grains, alfalfa, grass, pasture. Those soils are much more resilient to, and we had, in this part of the state, we had just barely a drought. You go over across the mountain in the southeastern Vermont, southern New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, they're hurting over there. Lawns are dried right up and brown, corn shriveled up.
That's rough.
So we're over here, as much as people were complaining, we're down almost 6 inches of rain from July.
Wow.
But since the growing season, we're down about 5 inches, and this is looking at the average and what's happening at the airport, their weather station. But as we were speaking before the show, I'm only down 1.33 inches in Shasbury compared to the airport. Just because you probably see it from Mount Anthony. You can see it downpouring someplace, and here it's not raining at all, and it doesn't rain.
Yep.
So it's hit and miss. So my soil was much more resilient, and I had more rain than other places did.
Yeah, I live right by the airport, so I'm probably closer to their weather
Probably to that weather pattern.
And it comes from there to my house, basically, and so I get basically that line of weather. Right,
and I can look down, I can see Mount Anthony.
Yeah.
Get in my mailbox, and you can see it. It's black.
Yep.
And where I am, the sun's shining.
I've had some rain, that's for sure, but definitely not enough.
You have
Just
a-
enough
you
to
have-
wash
you
away
have-
the road.
You have a rain gauge?
No.
Yeah.
Well, I've had buckets and things outside, and I could just sort of guess. I mean, just
Put
look
a
at-
rain gauge up. It really opens
Yeah.
your eyes up to, oh wow, that was a lot of rain. Or I thought it rained harder than that, and that's not very much rain.
Exactly. Yeah. So how do you know? How do you know the percentage of organic matter in your soil? Is
You
there a
get a
test
soil
for it?
test
Okay.
for it's 12 or 14 bucks.
Really?
You send it off to UVM. All they need is about a cup of soil.
Really?
So I believe you need a soil auger so you can get down to 6 to 8 inches.
Okay.
Pull that core out. You throw it in a bucket, and you do. Like if I'm doing it for a commercial farm, I'm taking a sample every 50 paces
Oh,
and
okay.
zigzagging across the field. So a big field, I could have a bucket half full of soil, and you mix all that up uniformly.
Okay.
Then I'll take it and I'll bounce it like this, sorry, right in front of the camera,
Yeah.
into a container, trying to get most uniform sample you can get.
Yeah, you want it to be precise, especially with the figures they give you.
Yeah,
They are very
because if you
precise.
just take one sample out of your garden, could be the place the woodchuck peed, and it's going to be really high in phosphorus and nitrogen.
Yeah.
So you want to take it uniformly. You want to take it from areas that, say you got a wet spot, going into a big field. I'm going across. Oh, I just went into a wet hole. I'm not taking a sample there because that's made me throw it off. Or the farmer said I got the manure spreader stuck over there in that area. I had to empty it to get it, pull it out. So I'm not going to take a sample from there because that will mess the sample up.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And then
So- sorry.
then you get the there's a soil sample. You probably can't read that, but that's what you get from UVM. And this one, the organic matter, this was at the middle school. The organic matter, they moved things around on here, was 3.2. For growing vegetables, you're getting up above 5 is better, 6, and then you can. So if we went from 3.2 to 5.2, again another 40,000 gallons of water per acre you could hold in that soil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you mulch it, you have less leaving. So there's all, and plus organic matter. It's like the key. All the microorganisms all feed off of it. And it makes your soil life so much more alive. Your soil is, the better. And now they're actually, Dairy One, who is where all Cornell samples go. They actually have a soil health test now. And in addition to this, they'll do your soil texture, and that's how much sand, silt, or clay you have in your soil.
I've probably got a lot of clay.
Or clay, the higher your clay, the higher the water holding capacity. The higher the sand, just like on a beach, the wave comes up, the water goes right away.
Yeah.
Same things happens if you have sandy soil, the water drains very quickly. There isn't stuff to hold on to it. So they'll do a soil texture for you. They'll do microbial activity of the soil.
All that for $12.
No, that's much extra. I think
Oh,
to
okay.
get a sample like that is running you 40 to 50, but it'll include this.
And they use this for their own research too, I would imagine.
Well, that's what
right?
they're finding is the more. This is just chemical. This is what's in the soil. It doesn't tell you anything.
Because you add a lot. Most people add soil from stores or farms or anything. Anyway, right?
I've never have, but if you have
Wow.
a soil that is
I'm jealous.
if I had a really sandy or really clay soil for a garden, I'd probably put in raised beds so I wouldn't have to
Yeah.
try to amend. Trying to change, a soil that comes out as a clay is very, very expensive. So you're better off doing raised beds and adding in leaf mold, compost, topsoil. So it's just right there where you're growing stuff. And there's so many interesting books on growing square foot gardening, how productive you can be in a small area when you have to be.
Yeah, I have. I think I'd call it more like a hybrid. So basically, there were flower beds in my yard for years from previous owners. I tore all that out, even though I still have flowers popping up all over. Probably always will, but I ordered a dump truck load of that mix that I was talking about that had topsoil, compost and manure mixed in with sand.
From where?
From a local. He does everything from excavating to selling. He takes in manure from farms and different things. So I ordered the whole load from them. They dropped it off in my yard. It was only a couple $100 including delivery from many miles away. So I thought that was fine. It was like 12 yards or something.
Wow.
So I think I got like maybe 9 or 10 inches on top of the clay or whatever that was already in, which I think they had already added to previously. And then I enclosed that, so it's sort of raised. I put a fence around that and then built rows just to get more height out of it. So basically I dug some out probably lower than the ground level to build up big rows, which I thought was kind of a nice way to almost mock raised beds, if that makes sense. But I don't really know enough about gardening to know if that was the best or most productive option.
One of the goals of raised beds was for particularly wet soils, you get them up, they dry out sooner, and they warm up quicker.
Yes.
And what they found at the middle school by doing raised beds on their soils, it dries out too much. So that
might be the case at mine.
They should leave it. They should just leave flat beds and just plant into them, and that way they don't have to worry about watering as much. And and it's just so much work to do them manually.
Yeah, mine's it's 11 or 12 by 44, and I did that. It was probably a couple hours with a shovel to make all the rows, so I didn't think that was bad. Maybe 2 hours, but that would make sense. I did put fabric down, like black fabric, which I think keeps it from drying as fast.
I hate
but
that stuff.
It's hard to water through that stuff too.
And then once weeds come through, you can't pull the weeds out because they're above and below it at the same time.
Oh yeah.
It's
It's held the weeds back pretty nicely, I would say, but
how long's it been there?
I just put it down this year. I mean, it was like $20 for enough to cover the whole thing, so I figure I'm not too worried if I have to buy another $10 worth next year or something.
Pull it up at the end of the year.
That's what I did last year. I pulled it up and put the same fabric back down because I only had it for part of the year last year.
That's the best way to work with that.
Yep.
Yeah, don't leave it down because it becomes a nightmare to get rid of.
I figured that would be. What do you recommend besides black fabric for mulch?
I've used stuff called Biotella. It's supposedly a plastic that breaks down if you till it in the soil. I haven't seen it break down really, but a farm over in Argyle says it breaks down. But he also has a bed maker, so when he makes his raised beds, the soil is very tight to it the whole summer. We're making my raised beds by hand. I'll only use it in sweet potatoes on raised beds. You don't get the same nice smooth soil to plastic contact, so it's not starting to break down all year. Only the place that's touching it. So I didn't find it breaks down as recommended as advertised. But
that's not a bad thing, really, right? And well,
you can't reuse it. It's very, very thin.
So you will pull it up anyway.
Yeah, I will pull it up.
So that's probably better than encouraging plastic to break down.
Well,
right?
and I think if I rototilled it, it would just be all wound up in the rototiller.
Exactly. That's what I pictured when you said that.
But I saw his field, and there's just little pieces of black plastic in the field, and he said it breaks down. So.
But I wonder what they'll find in 5-10 years.
Well, it's
for byproducts or something.
It must be a corn-based product to break down.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yes, I don't believe it's. I don't know enough about it. I know that organically it was not certified at the moment. That may have changed because this farm is certified organic, so they must have changed that. Leaf mold works for mulch. Grass clippings.
By leaf mold, do you mean
like
just
like this? This is.
Is that from the woods almost?
No, this is like I collect people's bags of leaves along the road and bring them home, and then they rot like that.
How long will that take? A year maybe? Oh, it says 2 year right on it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because I have woods, half of my yard is woods. I could probably find something similar in the woods, right? Because under the leaves it seems like really rich, nice soil. But I think, and there are pine needles too though, so I've heard that can be too high in nitrogen and stuff.
No, people think that pine needles will cause your pH to lower.
Oh, okay.
And that has not been really found to be true.
Oh, okay. So maybe I should just, at the
I
end
mean,
of
if you
this
put
year-
on this much pine needles every year in the same place, because I've used them when I run out of leaves to mulch my garlic, We have a big pine tree in the front yard, and they rake up all of them, and it's like, okay, I'll put it on this area. It doesn't seem to affect anything.
So is that a good plan? Do you think maybe in November when I'm pulling things out, pulling all the stalks out, should I pull the fabric up and load it with leaves and pine needles, and then till it in next year? Or?
Yeah.
Because I didn't do that last year.
The other issue you have with bare soil, you got a raindrop coming down, and it's got some velocity to it. So you have bare soil, particularly garden soil. It's loose.
Mm-hmm.
It hits the soil. It breaks little tiny soil particles apart, and depending on your soil, it can clog the. Particularly, you get a really in the summertime. You get those torrential downpours, a great big raindrops, really pounds of freshly cultivated soil, and it can seal that off, and all that water runs off instead of infiltrating.
That's what ruins my road. I think the water doesn't soak in; it just sort of flows along the top.
So if you have a lot of organic matter in your soil, or a mulch, either living mulch. Another thing you can do is a living mulch, where mid-August you can go through like under your kale or under any of your bedding plants that are up tall, and broadcast oats. And they'll suck up the excess nitrogen. You have a nice oat crop in October that winter kills, and it leaves a cover, so any rain coming down between your plants is hitting something else to break up the raindrops before it hits your soil, and you get better. It's like even a torrential downpour. You're standing in the woods, it's a mist coming down.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah.
So that's the whole idea of a living mulch, or like the oats, or planting your plants like John Jevons equidistance apart. So, but when they're fully grown, they're covering all the soil that's bare. So in between that time, you got plants growing, and once they get there, there's no weeds either because they're shading them out.
That's what's going on at my place now. I mean, I have my rows. I put them a little tighter than the package would say, the seed pack, and just because I feel like if I can squeeze more into it, it's maybe more productive. But I also have read that it's better to protect the soil and the fruit, because then they get shade, so you don't get burns on the veggies or anything. But yeah, there are almost no weeds even where I don't have fabric.
Yeah, and I take care of my weeds early on with a wheel hoe. It's got like a 30-inch wheel on it, and handles, and then 5 cultivators on the back.
Oh.
And I'll plant, and in the next 7 days on a hot sunny day, I go between the rows, even if you don't see weeds, because you're getting the tiny little weeds that are just germinating, and that's the
roots,
easiest
right?
way to get rid of them. You bring them up on a hot sunny day, they die. And I do that every 5 to 7 days when it's really hot out, because if you see the weeds, it's too late. It's hard to get rid of them.
The roots are deep, and you pull that. And
it's hard. Then you got a hand weed.
Yep.
So I do that, and I have very little hand weeding. I mean, with carrots, you have to be very careful.
Yep.
So I plant with a garden waste seeder. So it's got a press wheel in the back, so you push it along, and you can see where the row was. So the first few times through, you got to go slow, so you don't go into where your plant. Nothing's up yet.
You don't want to dig up the seeds.
And that's another reason people plant radishes with everything, because it marks your row really quickly.
Oh, that makes sense.
And then like on corn, the last cultivation, I have a little plow thing I can put onto it, so I throw the dirt into the row to try to smother the weeds that are in the row. And the plant's big enough so you can do that.
Yeah.
Until the canopy closes, and then it shades out, and you have things come up, but they're not going to affect your productivity of your crop, because there isn't enough of them to do anything.
Yeah.
Other than go to seed.
Oh yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I try to just walk into the garden. I see something going to seed, I pull it out.
Yeah, that's a good point. How much space are you gardening? It sounds like it's at least an acre or so.
No,
right?
it's probably counting the fruit and the nut trees, maybe a quarter acre.
Oh, okay. But you help on like at the middle school where it's probably an acre total.
No, they don't have that. They're probably barely a quarter acre.
Really? Including the where they have the. What do they have this year? They put a ground cover in this year.
I put in buckwheat.
Buckwheat, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So that's really only about a quarter.
I'm guessing it's actually in production. There's a lot of.
Oh, the area takes up a lot of space, but it's not all planted.
Yeah, and there's
right?
stuff that teachers had planted and abandoned. It isn't in production. It's in the weeds and.
That's too bad. But
Yeah.
it takes so much work that they don't have the kids there in the summer to help
Right.
with that, right?
That's a goal, right, Nathan? Get
Yeah.
the kids there in the summer.
Right.
Are you guys working with the Mosaic program then?
We're on the ag
That's
committee
fun,
at the
yeah.
middle school.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. The Mosaic program did operate this summer. I guess they had.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there doing some video with them.
Yeah.
My goal is to have kids there all summer selling.
That's an awesome idea because
Yeah.
they're not going to use tomatoes and things in the cafeteria when they're coming out in July and
Put-
August.
Do a middle school CSA for teachers and neighbors.
And then
Yeah.
when school starts, then they said they might incorporate a few items into their cafeteria for a couple
They
weeks.
all should
but
be incorporated. That's personal opinion.
I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah, and now's when a lot of these things will be most productive and school's back in
we
session.
should get the menu
help
for
with
the
that.
middle school and then plant stuff starting next year to be feeding the
Agreed.
school. There we have 10 acres here we can use.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to help with that. And we could do PSAs here, help
But it's more
publicize it.
political inertia at school board level is the biggest problem. Personal opinion,
Always.
not the opinion of Cat TV or anyone sitting next to me.
That's unfortunately often the case. Yeah. So you were going to demonstrate something about.
Well, I'm
the-
going to try to
Permanent.
show water holding capacity. And if I'd have thought of this last night, I could have a much better demonstration. So I'm going to take some of this 2-year-old compost. I'm going to put a cup into this funnel.
That's nice.
And we did this at the Yap Gardens with my soil and their soil. My soil held like a 1/4 inch more water, but that's on 1 cup. So
Yeah.
you spread that over an acre, that's a lot of water holding capacity, more that I had that they didn't have, just difference in soil type.
Yeah.
So let's put just a cup of water in there. You know, ideally I'd have if I'd have thought of this earlier, whoops, getting it all over your table, I would have gone around the county, found a soil that's sandy, found a soil that's clay, found
Yeah.
a soil that's loamy, and then you could really see and do 3 at a time. It'll take a while. Probably should have done it right in the beginning. Now, you know, if that was a sandy soil, the water would all be right, it'd gone right through.
All right, too. Right.
If it's been a clay
Yeah.
soil, it may not even start dripping yet.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's why I had to put in drainage through my yard, gravel beds, to keep the yard from getting
Yeah.
too saturated.
You know,
The camera can see this. How fast it's draining through there.
and if you did this would be a great, any science class should do this, not necessarily an ag class, just a water holding capacity of soil, what's going on in there, what's happening, and then extrapolate that out to an acre basis, then it starts to be big numbers.
And how thick is that? How deep is the soil?
We're
too,
looking
right?
at,
Is that a factor?
well, we're looking at an acre furrow slice, which is 1 acre, which is 43,560 square feet, 6 inches deep.
6 inches
6
deep,
to 8
okay.
inches, the plow depth
Yeah.
is
That
what
makes
they're looking at.
sense.
But my soil is, you can talk about a deep soil, I go from here to here before I start hitting subsoil.
Wow.
And the subsoil is where you see a difference in the color.
Mm-hmm.
So my top, it's 6 to 18 inches of topsoil.
Wow.
And then you hit this lighter brownish colored, and then you go deeper. And I don't have any rocks in my garden.
Right.
My rocks are the size of this, I just dug one out the size of this table.
Whew.
There was a place in the old strawberry bed where the strawberries in that area, if it kind of really, really dry, I'd have to water there because the soil's only this deep because it's sitting on top of this rock.
Mhm.
Ah.
And I finally said, nothing's growing there this fall.
That makes sense.
I'm going to dig that rock out. And it was almost as long as the table, as wide as a table, and from this to this thick.
Did you have heavy equipment to lift it
There
out?
was a small compact tractor that got abused to get it out of the
Yeah.
ground. But most of my ground is like that. The rocks are big and they're at the plow lever.
Oh, okay.
But the soil, there's no real stone in it at all.
Mhm.
So it's silt loam.
So it's good stuff then.
It's good because it holds moisture, but then it's bad on a wet year. It holds moisture.
That's a good point.
That's why you do these. This is a soil survey map of the middle school area, and those lines, like on a topographical map, show where different soils start and finish. And then you look those numbers up in the soil survey. Bennington County does not have a. I thought I threw that in. Must be I did not. There's a soil survey disc we have that you can get from Natural Resource Conservation Service. You pop it in your computer, and it will give you. I guess I don't have that with me. Sorry about that. I'm so unprepared. But there's another one. They'll have maps like this, and put the paper behind it so it can be seen. Like that. And the county be done up in quadrants. You pick the quadrant you live in, you click on that, it opens up to a map like that. You find where you live, you can expand the picture as an aerial photo. Oh yeah, my house is right there, number 67B. Then you go to the other, you end up with a chart like this, which you can't see on the camera, I'm sure, but this one is at the middle schools, is a Stockbridge soil. So it's a 64B. You look that up in a chart, you click on that, you get all this information on that soil.
Wow.
So before you buy farmland, you can, and even if you own land, you can look at it and say, oh yeah, I see, okay, that's, like on my ground, I have what's called perched water tables. There'd be areas in the pasture, all the same soil type, you're walking along and it's all wet. Right in that area, there's a layer of impermeable material that causes the water to sit there and not go anywhere. And you walk 10 feet farther, it's totally different vegetation, but it's the same soil type. It's just that one little spot, size of this room, is really wet. And it's like, why is that? Why is that? I didn't know until I read the soil surveys. It has perched water tables. So it tells you all this, tons and tons of information. This one does not have, tells potential yields for different crops.
Oh, nice.
Could you grow a pond? Could you have a pond there? Could you put a basement with a dwelling with a basement in? It tells about perk tests. It tells all this stuff, and it's all free. And anyone who's buying property anywhere should get the soil survey for their area and go through it. And if you don't understand it, you go back and make NRCS explain it to you, because they work for us. Our taxpayer money supports them.
And is this, so there's not one available for Bennington, or?
This is the only county I ever lived in that did not have a big, thick book like this with all the information in it. They had it all in loose paper in Jenny Kimberly's office back when Jenny Kimberly was here, our NRCS agent. So I was photocopying all these papers. I got this big pile of papers. Then they came out with it on a CD. And CD's easy to work through. Lots of great, like I say, you can print out what you want. You can print out all these maps. Be a great activity for any middle school or high school science class to go through. It's like, learn about your county. I don't know what they do locally. I know in my middle school in New York State, all I remember is 7th grade, we learned about our county. All the towns, all the roads, the history, the politics, how all work together, farms, what different parts are used for. There's an old canal here, there's an old railroad there, how come the railroads went away? And then 8th grade, we did the whole state, all the counties of the state, where they were, what part of the state produced this, what part of the state produced that, the history of the state. It's like, so I know New York State. You say a county in New York, I can say, well, it's probably up here. It's over. May not know exactly where it is, but I know the region it's in. And I think we should do that in Vermont.
Yeah, I don't think we did quite that. I think we did local history, the Revolutionary War, and everything, but I don't recall any of this.
That's personal opinion again. That's not opinion of Cat TV or anyone else. But if you don't know your own area, how can you expand your? How can you relate to the world if you don't know your own place in it?
Yes.
Personal opinion again. I don't want to get you guys shut down.
Oh no, no worries. What are your thoughts on? I keep hearing so much about apple trees doing so poorly this year. I think it's probably a combination of things. But what are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, I could even say like last year around this time, my apples were about this big. This one's store bought. This year, this is what I've got.
Same tree.
Different tree, just because. Well,
I mean, your tree last year, where this came from, the apples looked like
they were this size last year. Yeah, obviously they're different types, but I have a picture that I posted yesterday or this day a year ago. Yesterday on Facebook, the apple was this size, and I was baking. That's what I have this year, and this is I only have 3 productive. They're not even very productive trees out of 12.
Feral trees or planted trees.
They were there when I bought the house, so I'm not really sure. I mean, they've been there. Some are this big around, so I mean, they've been there for a long time. But yeah, they're still producing. Like last year, I had more apples than I knew what to do with, and they were huge, very, very nice. And this year,
all
nothing.
over the Northeast last year was a tremendous apple crop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commercial orchards do things to even out the production, so every year they have a crop. Homeowners, wild trees, a lot of those old varieties, they're biannual. They produce a really big crop and then almost nothing, depending on the year. And last year was a phenomenal. I saw trees I never knew were apple trees because they're full of bloom. I didn't know there were apple trees along this road. A lot of them produced little green apples, but last year was tremendous. This year, I think a couple things happened. No winter, then we had a 27 below at my house. Pownell had in the below 30s.
It was like March or April, right?
It was Valentine's Day weekend. We were delivering flowers. It was a trick getting flowers from the vehicle to the house without them freezing.
Wow.
Oh my.
So it was mild, no winter, then bang, and then mild, and first week in April I had a 4. Other people had lower.
That's what it was. That I think.
And that took out. I think the 27 below took out my peach blossoms. And if it didn't, then probably that 4 did in April. That and it was dry early on. Like where were we? We were down March, April, down 7/10 of an inch, 6/10 of an inch. May 7/10 of an inch.
And that's just this year per month, right?
Yeah, per month. And we were down 1.7 inches in January. February we're up 1.6. This is airport data.
Yep.
I know when I do USDA surveys. I'm an annoying person that bothers farmers for data. And I know Southern Vermont Orchard said they were okay because they had irrigation. Across the mountains, there was an orchard. They were filing for disaster relief from lack of rain. So you combine mild winter, then slammed with the coldest days, coldest 1-day temperature I've had since I lived here since '95.
Oh, wow.
And then warm, and then cold again. Plants don't like going like this. If you stay cold and real cold, they adapt to that. But a slamming, and then dry weather screws up their pollination.
Yep.
If trees are pollinating and you get a torrential downpour and it stays cold and cloudy for several days, all that pollen's gone, the bees aren't out. So all those things combined, plus a huge crop the year before, all that predicts you're going to have a short crop this year.
Yeah, and I've had this house for I think 4 years now, and every year has been a pretty good crop of apples. I think the year I bought the house there weren't too many. I don't recall picking any apples, and I know there were some on the trees, but every year's been pretty good since then.
There's things you can do in a heavy year. You prune heavy in the summer. You
in the summer you prune. You
can do well. Probably apple people. If I got that wrong, please call in. But you can do summer pruning to control growth.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So like this year, you have vigorous trees and no growth. Would have been a good year. I think apple growers, you can help me out here. There was a live call in, but you want to sort of bring some of that vigorous growth back because it's not going to fruit. It's all going to leaves.
Yep.
So there's pruning techniques. I should say I don't know when you should do it, but there are summer pruning techniques to help even out the season. Commercial growers will do things to thin the blossoms, so there's only so many blossoms.
Oh, yeah.
Backyard people, you can pick apples. You can
Yeah, even when they're small, right?
Yeah, you got two apples together, pick one.
I've heard
and then
that
you keep
too.
apples every 6-8 inches apart. You unless you depends on the apple tree. You could have those comp spurs that produce lots of apples close together, as supposed to. But older trees like yours, if you thin them, you'll get more bigger apples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had some last year bigger than this even, and a lot of them were too high to pick, but I'd have to knock them down and then they'd be damaged. But the trees are also just way too tall. But yeah.
So that's my view of why there's less apples this year.
That makes sense.
A bunch of things happen together to really reduce the crop. So in Vermont, I just drove down that road the other day. They look like I should say most of it looks really good. I did see areas there was a lot of smaller not apples, and I saw other areas where they're just loaded.
So they're probably fine this year, I would imagine.
They'll probably have slightly below average year, but you won't know till November till the picking's all done.
That's true, yeah.
Huh.
I mean, certain varieties may have less. Like I say, there's some trees they look beautiful. You know, there's like, wow, that tree, that block are smaller and less apples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed in my yard is basically in a hill. Everything in the lower shaded area, the part that's shaded by the pine trees and everything, there are 0 apples. And the 3 trees that are up and get better sunlight near my garden in the top are where I'm actually producing a few apples. So I'll probably, if I'm willing to like work with smaller apples this year, be able to still make, bake from them and everything. But I wonder if it's also the frost affected the ones in the colder area differently, because I'm thinking maybe the frost didn't go as deep in the backyard where it's warmer, more sunlight. So I imagine that would make sense.
I had an interesting phenomenon one year with my cover crop. In the northwest corner of the garden, there's a gap in the hedgerow, and there was buckwheat planted as a cover crop the whole length of the bed, with the west end right by the gap. And it was a day we got a frost, but not a killing frost.
Mm-hmm.
But the cold air came down off the pasture through that gap, and the buckwheat at that end was dead. And as you came back, this was only 150-foot bed. You got back to the other end, it was all perfect and tall.
Oh, nice.
So the cold air funneled a little microclimate, just that. It wasn't cold to kill everything, but the cold air coming off, it sinks, and it came through there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So we're almost out of time. We put a cup of water in there. And I should have brought the other. So it looks like it kept about a quarter of it.
Yep.
So if you'd had a rainstorm and that soil would have held on to 25% of the rain, theoretically.
Yeah.
But that would be mixed with the other actual soil, because that's just total compost. But and if it had been a sandy soil, we know most of it would come right through. The other ones, and the other thing I didn't talk about was the bulk density. That's how much weight per volume. This leaf mold has very little weight per volume, so there's not as much material there as there was there.
Oh, right.
So it ran through a little bit faster. But if that was mixed into your soil, like there was one study, 3 inches of leaf compost mixed into the soil increased the water holding capacity of a sandy soil by 2.5. So two and a half
times.
2.5 times.
Wow.
So that there's lots of data out there. I mean, it's all research. So what happens on a research farm isn't always totally applicable to, but generally, it's like generally you add compost, leaf mold, cover crops, mulch, you're gonna weather a droughty year much better than you will if you just have all the soil open and you never add anything but commercial fertilizer to it.
Yeah. So I guess, and it seems like we have a few more minutes, so I'll have a question. Maybe this will help viewers as well. I know a few years ago, especially, raised beds have become more and more popular. People with apartments, everything, have been producing even a small bed or working on several large beds. This is the end of my second year having a full-size garden with that load of soil I ordered. what might be some tips for rotation? Because like I have tomatoes and peppers and like squash and beans and things on the other side, and I've flipped sides. But what might be a good piece of advice?
Rotating plant families.
Mm-hmm.
So tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, tomatoes, tomatillas are all in the solanaceous family.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have them in one area, don't plant them. Then you have your legumes, your beans, your peas. That's probably the only thing we grow in gardens as a legume. Rotate those because they're a nitrogen fixer. They take nitrogen out of the air. The rhizobia bacteria have a symbiotic relationship with the roots of a legume. So when you pull up your bean plant, you'll see a little nodule on there. Mm-hmm. That's not a disease. That's the bacteria forces the plant to form around it by injecting hormones and stuff into it. In return, the plant gets nitrogen. They take the N2 out of the air and turn to the nitrates and nitrites that the plant can use. So if you had your beans here this year, put in a heavy feeder there next year, like corn or potatoes, because they take a lot of nitrogen, because there'll be more nitrogen in the soil where those legumes were. Or you can plant legumes. You can plant clovers or vetches, things like other legumes, as a cover crop, and till them in for the following year to plant a heavy feeder. Okay. Your vine crops are another whole family. Rotate them.
Like the tomatoes and things like that.
No,
right?
vine crops.
Oh, okay.
Squash, cucumbers, melons.
Oh.
Tomatoes are in the potato family.
Okay.
And then the other big one are the brassicas. That's cauliflower, cabbage, kohlrabi, kale. That's another family. So you plant them in one area, then you can move the whole family to another area. In a small garden, you're not gaining a lot as far as disease and stuff because they're right in the same close area, but it helps just to move them a little bit like that. And then your other families are going to be your beets, chard, spinach, and then lettuce is another one. I'm not sure. I think okra could be in its own little family someplace too.
So since I've basically flipped sides, this is the second year, so I've only flipped once. I'll probably lose productivity if I were to just flip them back, right? Shouldn't I do something? Isn't it more like a 3-year rotation?
The
minimum?
longer the better.
Yeah.
But in a small area, it's really difficult.
Because I want tomatoes and peppers next year too, so I don't know.
The other thing to do is go out in the woods and pull in dead trees and use them as to hold your bed in. And that way your soil doesn't kind of slowly move away. So you know this bed here was tomatoes or peppers or eggplant or potatoes, all those solanaceous crops. So you know it's right there. And then you have your other one. You don't have them next to each other.
So I can section it
You can have your beds rotated out too. So your beds are far apart, so you can rotate between the beds.
Cool.
That soil, that stuff held how much water just before we go? That held a little bit more. There's a little less than 3/4 of a cup in there.
Yep.
So that leaf mold drained faster but held more water.
Oh, okay.
But again, in a sandier soil, most of that water would come right through.
In our garden, we have just 4 raised beds, and 2 of them were devoted to onions. 1 was tomatoes. Well, there's also squash and greens, and so you really can't go more than 3 years.
It's hard. In a little area, it's really difficult. Even within your bed, you could. Just doing that rotation. So you had tomatoes here and onions there, and the next year you can put the onions over in that bed. You can rotate within a bed.
Yeah.
Any rotation you can do is good.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, the clock says we still have 30 minutes.
It's past 11.
Oh.
You're gone.
Oh my. Well, how time flies when you're having fun, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks for all the info. I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alan. Totally awesome.
Just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Well, just if people get the basic concept of...
I forgot to show my
the
drip irrigation, or the soaker hose.
Well, it's better to get this concept of the holding power of different kinds of
That's
soil.
the key to drought resiliency.